Welcome to Arc Photo Pod, the architectural photography podcast. My name is Jordan Powers. I'm an architectural photographer and video producer based in the Southeast United States. In this episode, I interview my really good friend, Adam Taylor. Adam is currently living in Oahu, Hawaii, but he was in Los Angeles traveling for a couple of photo shoots. I just happened to be out there the same week, so we decided to get an Airbnb together. So we took some of the time that we had while hanging out, and we sat down for a very, very long interview. But Adam and I talk regularly. We are in a group together. I helped him produce his course, Learn to License Your Photo, several years ago. We talk monthly in depth about our businesses, about life. We've become very good friends over the years. So what do you talk about with somebody who you already talk about everything with? Well, we talk about business because that's what we do most often. So hopefully you enjoy this fly on the wall type episode. This is kind of the kind of conversations that I have with a lot of my close friends very often. So hopefully you enjoy seeing what it's like behind the scenes on this. We talk a little bit about how we interact with clients and how we do our business. So hopefully you found this episode insightful. If you're not yet following Adam on Instagram, you can do so at Adam Taylor Photos, and you can follow me on Instagram at Jordan Powers without the vowels. Enjoy this episode with Adam Taylor.
For two burritos and 4 hours later, we're finally going. So what do we talk about? We've been talking about everything for the last couple of days. We've talked countless times in person, over the phone, online. Mm-hmm.
What else is there?
Where do we take this? What do two people who have, we said this earlier, what do two people who have talked about everything talk about?
Good question. Creative sparks, taking pictures, the business of taking pictures.
Let's talk about how we both ended up out here. Ironically.
Okay. So set the context, right?
Yeah, set the context. So we planned on doing a workshop out here in January. It didn't work out. Mm-hmm. Missed you in November when you were in the Asheville area. Yep. You were in North Carolina. I missed you there because I had a shoot come up. Before that, I hadn't seen you since PMRE 2021. Yep. No, 2022. Oh, yeah, 2021.
Yeah.
So it's been a while since I'd seen you. And then, like I said, we talk all the time online and over the phone. But yeah, and then all of a sudden, I remember you saying you had a shoot out here.
Yeah,
you were talking about.
Rewind a little bit because I didn't know if I wanted to have a shoot out here.
Oh yeah.
Because you actually pushed me to come here.
Oh yeah, that's right. What happened with that?
So all right, I'm gonna rewind even more because December 2022, I was in Ecuador, and I was taking pictures with my iPhone of some cool buildings in like the larger city of Quito. Ended up seeing the same logo on a couple of the buildings. Found out that that's the developer. Looked them up on Instagram, tagged them on Instagram. The president of the development company DM'd me and gave me his personal email address and said, hey, send me a message, like we should chat. And that started spinning into, maybe I could actually market myself outside of Hawaii to do photo shoots elsewhere. Mm-hmm. And so it got the idea going of, is that something I even want to do? Like, it sounds cool and exciting and fun to like go to a different country to shoot, but would I really enjoy actually leaving my family behind to go do work? Because frankly, when I was in the BMX world, I traveled all the time, and part of the reason I started shooting houses is because they don't move, and I could shoot them without traveling. And so I was like wrestling back and forth of like, do I even want to market myself that way? Would I even accept a job in Ecuador or whatever? And I knew that at least two of my clients in Hawaii had projects that they had mentioned to me in California, which is where I had moved from anyway. Yeah. So I felt like maybe I should try to schedule some photo shoots in California as like almost like a trial run. Mm-hmm. And so I kind of put the feelers out there of like, hey clients, and I think I got this from Mike Kelly where he might have said at one point that he reaches out to people and says, I'm planning a trip to this area.
Oh, yeah.
Even though I wasn't planning the trip yet, I was just kind of putting feelers out to see if they had projects that would line up. And so I just like threw out some dates that I thought might fit with my schedule. And once I started thinking about that, I was telling you of like, I kind of want to do it, but I'm not really sure. And part of my trepidation behind it was, am I just going to like go there and be bored? Like, I do stuff with my wife and my kid all the time. Like we're together nonstop. Yeah. And to leave them, like, am I just going to be lonely and bored and just like feel depressed or something because I'm sitting in a hotel room by myself? And so you kind of pushed me like, well, if you plan ahead enough, like you can eliminate that by meeting up with other photographers, like, Lauren and Arturo are out there and blah, blah, blah. So through talking to you, I was like, you know what? You're right. Like I should push myself, get out of my comfort zone, plan ahead enough. So I did it and was able to schedule one photo shoot with my Hawaii client, which would be like a full day shoot, and then reached out to some handful of previous California clients. And one of them said, yep, I can line up a shoot on one of those days that you're there. So I'm like, cool, like 2 shoots, I'm guaranteed to make some money. Let's go for it. After that was already said and done, then you were like, hey, what day is he going to be there? I'm actually going to be there too. So how you got here is...
Well, you skipped a few things too. Like I remember one of the conversations we had was you weren't sure if you were going to do this, but it was also because this was kind of an experiment to see if you wanted to even do the travel at all.
Right.
It was like California is a short enough trip.
Yep.
You're familiar with it. You've already got clients here.
Right. It's like the low-hanging fruit and like an easy trial. Like I'm familiar with the area.
Yeah. And I think that, you also have some like consulting clients that you have out here as well. So that was a potential opportunity.
Oh, right. Yeah.
But I'm saying low-hanging fruit, you had, this because you've traveled the world already. You've already done all that. Do you feel, did this Ecuador trip kind of like re-spark the interest in traveling again, or?
I don't think so. You know what it was that in my head, I wasn't at a level to where I could envision anybody ever hiring me outside of the Hawaiian Islands, or maybe California, but, based on my previous relationship with them.
Yeah.
Because in my mind, it's like, why would somebody fly me from California to LA to do a photo shoot when there's gobs of photographers out here? Yeah. Or why would they fly me from Hawaii to Ecuador, or name the country, name the place?
Right.
But once one person that, is the president of this massive development company in a big urban area, metropolitan city, whatever, once he even threw the idea out there of like, let's even have a conversation, I was like, oh, damn, like maybe it is possible. And so I think, I don't know if it was lack of confidence or just lack of seeing it from another perspective of like how he might see it, or anybody else that might potentially hire me, how they might see it. But yeah, just kind of like put the bug in my ear just enough to think I should explore this,
Yeah. Well, so going back to like how I ended up here, because I think we even had during that conversation, I said, hey, maybe I'll even come out there and shoot with you or something.
Yeah.
It was random. And then, so Simon Devitt just happened to post that he's going to be out here. I asked him if he wanted an assistant, and I would fly out here on my own dime and shoot it. And I was like, what weeks or what day is going to be here? And he said, basically the week of the 20th. And then I reached out to you. I was like, hey, when are you going to be there again?
Yeah, same week.
So here we are. Now we're sharing an Airbnb, basically rooming up for the week. So so you have and then the weather here in Southern California is garbage basically this week. It's all rainy. So you're shooting tomorrow. You're going to shoot Thursday as well?
Friday. So the shoot, so just to fill in the gaps for people listening, watching, whatever, I flew in on a Monday evening. I was scheduled to have an all-day shoot on a Tuesday, a small shoot on a Wednesday, and then Thursday kind of an off day where I was like, okay, I'm going to go hand out portfolio books and try to have some meetings or something, and then leave Friday. Well, the weather was forecast to be really terrible on Tuesday, which is today. It was terrible, so we had to push it back to a Friday. But by doing that, being that this trip for me was an experiment and a learning experience, like I was, trying to figure out the logistics. A, do I want to do this? But B, like what other logistics are there when you travel for this type of work?
Yeah.
Because I haven't encountered those hurdles yet. Well, now I've just encountered a new hurdle that I know to speak about or know to think about if I decide to do this kind of stuff, because...
Weather?
Exactly. What happens if you book a trip and the weather's bad? Like I've only booked a trip for 3 days. Like we only managed, accounted for 1 day of shooting. So do you change the flight? Do you cancel everything, reschedule for a different time?
Bring the family?
Yeah. I mean, what do you do? Bring the family. I've already kind of nixed that one.
Depends though. I mean, like if it's a trip to Ecuador or something, or even
maybe, but
you know what I mean?
Maybe.
Well, but my point is like you at least know those options,
right? Well, so the reason why I make those faces and make those sounds is because I've brought them on a trip to Maui before, just island hop, and even though it was just like a 1 day photo shoot of a small Airbnb, having them there just like completely had my mind in a different place, and I didn't feel like I could be the best husband and dad that I could be and the best photographer that I could be.
Well, yeah,
at the same time.
What if you like flew out there separate, did your shoots, and then had them out I mean, I don't know. I'm just thinking, like, I'm talking more about being away from them. You know, being on the road, flying around. Like, would that make things a little easier?
I don't know if it would. You know, like I said, it was a different type of stress that I didn't anticipate, like by having them there in Maui, especially because we were staying at the place that I was shooting, and they were like, you know, needed to stay out of the place until after sunset when I was done shooting or whatever. And yeah, like I said, it's just a different state of mind that I'm in when I'm like at a place to be focused on one thing and have them, you know, taking up mental focus or whatever.
Yeah, I can see that. But at the same time, are they taking any mental focus with you being here? Like
no,
okay.
I can disconnect from it pretty easily. Like, I mean, it sounds shitty or whatever.
No.
When I leave and just forget about them, right? Like, haven't forgot about them. I call them in the morning and the evening, but I can ignore the fact that they're not here pretty well, you know?
Yeah.
I'm not like thinking about them constantly or anything.
Yeah. Speaking of which, I saw a message come up. I'm like, ooh, it's 10:15 where my family's at right now. So I'm like, ooh, I'm going to need to call my wife soon because last night I missed the conversation. So that's another thing to consider is like the time difference. You know, it's like they're 3 hours behind right now?
Currently, yes.
So look, I mean, if you're all the way on the East Coast shooting something, you're going to be 6 hours ahead. Well, 7 hours if it's not daylight savings time. So it's like, or even in another time zone across the country, it's like, I don't know, I can imagine that being a lot more difficult.
Yeah, it could be.
Yeah. So so far, I mean, you haven't shot yet. We went out and explored a little bit. Would you think you would make a trip just for, I know it's expensive, but like being able to, like you've been to PMRE, you were a speaker there though, you got paid for that. Like, do you see in the future, like doing any kind of, I don't want to say recreational trips, but like, you know, you and I went out exploring today. We're probably not going to use anything we did today because it was
like personal project trips.
Personal project trips or...
Yeah, that's a good question. I think...
It's expensive, so that's the challenge.
Right. You know, the fact that I create YouTube content or like, you know, marketing content, let's call it that, through email campaigns for shooting clients and for education clients, right? So the fact that I constantly look to create content of some kind, like I can see, you know, okay, maybe there's an ROI there, or I don't know. I think I would have to have like a real clear vision or goal in mind of like what that trip was for.
Yeah.
You know, I've gotten a lot of business and leads and conversations started by shooting projects on my own, you know, just on spec, go out, shoot something, reach out to a company and say, hey, I've got these photos of this building that you've worked on, yada, yada, yada. Let's have a conversation. That's worked out really, really well for me in many different ways. So could I extrapolate and do that outside of the islands? Could be, yeah.
I mean, that's what I'm trying to do.
Right.
To be honest with you, like, so every trip that I'm doing, I'm trying to get at least a little bit of like, if I can go around and drive and shoot a couple buildings so that I can create a blog post.
Yeah.
And like show up somewhere in the search results, showing that I am traveling actively. I am still shooting when I'm traveling.
Yeah.
Like, you know, I don't know if I'll use anything we shot today because they were just kind of throwaway shots. But while I'm here, I intend to get at least 4 or 5 shots that I can put on a blog post at the very least. But, you know, right now, being that, you know, we moved to Nashville, now we live in Asheville. There's like no work in Asheville really. There's maybe some residential stuff, but all the commercial stuff's in Nashville. So I have to live in Asheville, market myself in Nashville, and I'm like, I don't want to drive 5 hours every single time because it's a lot to travel. It's like, how can I, you know, go into these other cities and get, you know, blog content to kind of diversify the regions that I'm in. So we're going to Charleston next month rather, for like 3 days. We're going to run an Airbnb, and it's like a family vacation, but I'm going to supplement some of that with like, you know, business expenses. So
the other thing besides like a trackable ROI in terms of like, okay, I made a video I can put on YouTube, or I did a podcast with somebody that's going to market myself to education clients or whatever it might be, like that kind of thing. I do think there's a lot to the experience part of it. Yeah. And so just by, like I said, going out and shooting commercial exteriors in Hawaii, I learned what kind of hurdles there are of like, oh, well, I'm going to need to be standing here and I'm going to need an assistant to go across the street and move all these different things. Like if I'm by myself, I can't do that, but at least I know that's part of the conversation, so that when a client hires me, now I know to have that conversation about an assistance needed for this project because I'm going to be across the street. I can't leave my camera and go move this stuff. And, So there's certain things, that's just a small example of like experience that you can gather by doing this stuff. So just through the nature of me coming here, getting a car, getting an Airbnb, getting around town, dealing with the weather, meeting up with other people, like all that's part of the experience that I can learn from and draw from. And that experience is what gives me the knowledge to be able to have conversations more confidently with potential clients. Because I think I used to be like in the pretty big like fake it till you make it type category, where I would go into a client meeting and I would try to have a conversation as if I had already been doing this stuff for a while, even though I hadn't been. And they could probably sniff it out. I was trying to cover it up to where like, they couldn't smell it, but I'm sure some of them probably did more than I hoped so.
Yeah.
But if not, like I still didn't know. And I think the issue with that is that once you get in that situation and you realize, oh, I didn't expect this, or I didn't know this was coming, or I didn't realize this was going to be a hurdle in this project. I think that can kind of throw a wrench in the system. So getting the reps so that you encounter problems and know how to overcome those problems and know what hurdles are going to be in front of you that you're going to have to jump over. I think that is super helpful.
I think, confidence definitely comes, like there's arrogance and there's confidence and then there's like false confidence.
Yeah.
And I think the true confidence actually does come through.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times in my experience is when like, there's been times where I admitted like, I can't do that. Like I can't do that with those parameters that you've set, or, I can't shoot this in one day or a half day. Like this is going to require 2 days. And I think like, you said fake it till you make it. At one point in my career, I would have said, oh yeah, I can do that thing that should be 2 days in one day just because I want the job so bad. And there's still a little bit of that, man. I don't know how long it's going to be before I get rid of that. I've had a couple this is like a repeating theme in these conversations that I'm having is not necessarily fake it till you make it, but like that, I guess that beginner's confidence or beginner's lack of confidence rather, like how do you, where are you at this point in your career? We said at one point you were faking it till you make it. Like, where do you feel like you're at now? Not that you've made it, but like, how would you describe like your confidence level right now?
That's a good question. I feel like I'm pretty realistic about it, like we went to the SoFi Stadium today. Like that's a massive property that, spans blocks and blocks. And if somebody asked me, about shooting that, I wouldn't have previous experience to draw from that I could talk about, the types of hurdles that you would encounter in a project like that. Or even a hotel, for example. Like I remember watching some kind of behind the scenes YouTube video, or maybe it was even a blog post, whatever, but of somebody shooting a hotel and they were talking about needing to go into every room and like make sure all the lights worked and stuff ahead of time because they had this big hero shot at night that, required the whole building to be lit up and stuff. And they like literally went room by room and, had this like box full of light bulbs and et cetera. And so that type of thing, like I've never done that before. So I wouldn't have known to be prepared for that ahead of time,
Yeah.
So I think if somebody had asked me to shoot a hotel or a big thing like the SoFi Stadium, I would be in a place where I wouldn't have a lot to draw from. And I would cut the conversation short where my limitations are and not like make up stories or anything to embellish like what I'm capable of or like what my experience is.
We just talked about that today with the tree.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you can share that story if you want, but like the builder had an unrealistic expectation of what?
Yeah. So the story was that, this builder wanted to really focus on this tree in this courtyard that they built a courtyard around. Yeah. But on his rendering, the tree went up to 7 stories on the building. And in real life, it only goes up to 3 stories. So you couldn't like show the tree as much as he wanted. And I was able to just let him know that like, hey, I went visited, like, let's take a look at this and set expectations. But again, had I not gone there, I might not have known that. And had it been, a couple of years ago before I've shot so many commercial exteriors, I wouldn't have even thought to look at that, or I wouldn't have, had the confidence to have that conversation with him. I might have just said like, oh yeah, I'll do my best. Like I'll focus on the tree like you want me to or whatever.
Yeah.
But like good example is today, I had a call with a potential client or a new client, I guess. Like it sounds like they're going to hire me about shooting a high school. And I've never told them that I have or have not shot an entire school, but I've shot a couple of school buildings and enough commercial buildings with people walking through that when he asked about, okay, what's your process of like when we have people in the shots, I was able to explain like what I've done in the past in terms of, okay, you know, a school, you wait till the bell rings, there's a million kids walking by, and you just keep hitting the shutter for the 5 minutes while the traffic's heavy. Then you get back and like look for the best people. And so for the example that I told this guy on the call today was, okay, I centered it around this one guy on a skateboard because there was a guy that skateboarded by, and I had one frame where he just looked like in the perfect skateboard position. And so he was like my anchoring point. And after that, it was like, well, I can't have somebody too close to him on either side. So I need somebody a little bit further to balance it out. And then if there's a person there, I need a person over here to balance it. And so I was able to explain to him my process of going through that because I'd done it before.
Yeah.
But again, if it was the SoFi Stadium, I don't really know what that process looks like because I haven't done it. And so going back to like the traveling thing, you know, knowing how to work through the process of weather delays, like what do you do, you know? I think, again, going through it a handful of times to encounter obstacles and have experience to draw from would be helpful.
Yeah. Well, I think also just being able to say without having to think about it, this is what I've done in these scenarios.
Right.
So like you said earlier, getting the reps in of like just these practice shoots or like just driving around, exploring and looking for light, listening to videos, having conversations with other photographers. Like, what do they do? Like, did you hear the conversation Christian was talking about last night with how he got, I won't share the details on this, but like how he kind of got screwed over by a previous client of his.
No, I didn't hear
it. Okay. Well, you'll have to talk to him about it sometime. It's pretty fascinating, but it's like he learned like through this like difficult experience, like that he can go directly to the source instead of like working through a middleman. And not only, he doesn't necessarily like charge more, but he doesn't have to deal with all of the stuff he was dealing with. So I'm saying like he's shooting on cruise ships, you know, and these like really high paying jobs. So my point is, it's like, I don't know, sometimes the kind of unrelated scenarios help us, I don't know, explain things better or at least come off as more confident. So like, I look at you as somebody who's traveled all over the place for photography, for like the video work you're doing in the BMX world. Like, do you not lean on like that experience when it comes to this stuff? Because I feel like you've probably experienced more than most people have when it comes to
That's an interesting perspective, and I hadn't thought of it like that. I think just because it feels so different to me, you know. I mean, that was A, a lifetime ago, and B, just such a different mindset even. I mean, just to give you some context of like what pops in my mind, like we're sharing an Airbnb. Back then it was like I would sleep on the floor of somebody's crappy house, you know, because it's like cool to be a dirty BMXer and like it's accepted to just like be broke and, you know, couch surf and stuff like that. So it was like, for many years, like very much like super budget traveling style. And when you are in the BMX community and you're shooting BMX riders, like you already are linked up with people. So I wouldn't travel to a place to go to somewhere unknown. It was like I was traveling there for a competition where there's a huge, you know, bunch of riders and industry people all in one location for a specific reason. Or I would travel to go shoot specifically with a person or a group of people, in which case, like I'm already with those people, as opposed to traveling just to go look at a building of some sort, you know?
Yeah, well, plus you're older now and you've got a family, so you've like experienced different types of things now. And also, this is like you may not have thought of that as your long-term career. Maybe you just thought of it at the time you were doing it as this is what I'm doing now, and you didn't put any like foresight into like, I don't know, stuff like that in the future. Now you're actually considering this for your long-term career. You know, like things you have to consider, like we were talking about earlier, like knowing like, hey, I can't just plan on a two days of travel when I'm going on a trip. Like I maybe need a budget for like 3 or 4 days. You know, or like things you need to pack with you. So far, again, we're still only a couple days into this trip, but what have you taken away from this trip so far, aside from the weather and planning? Maybe that's a hindsight thing. I can ask you again in a couple months.
Well, already, I flew in Monday evening. I landed at like 4 p.m., right? So by the time you like get your bags, get out of the airport, get the rental car, get situated into a hotel, which you helped me with that because, you know, you were here, but had you not been here, like the amount of time that it would take to get from landing at LAX into my hotel and kind of settle down and then go get dinner, you know, it would have been a late-ish evening. Not late, but like, you know, it would have been evening time, bedtime, basically. And my shoot was originally scheduled for Tuesday morning, and you got to be there before sunrise. And so if I woke up LA time at 5 a.m., that's only 2 a.m., the time I just came from a few hours ago.
Yeah.
And so I've already taken away of like, hey, don't book a sunrise shoot the morning that you arrive, because already this morning I tried to wake up early and just like jump into the routine. And, I took melatonin and sleep pills last night to make sure that I could get the best quality sleep possible. So I was prepared in that sense, but I didn't have the foresight good enough in the beginning when I booked it to say, hey, I needed like another day to acclimate before I wake up at sunrise.
You think a day would be enough?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because we didn't do a ton today, but I would have done even less today and like, made sure I got lots of sleep and, had my workout, like get into my rhythm and like felt normal again or whatever.
Mm-hmm. How do you manage your health while you're traveling? You and I have talked about it a little bit, but like just for anybody listening, like.
Planning ahead, I guess, but let me back up and say that, well, first of all, I'm vegan for anybody who's unaware. So I'm vegan, and it's such an integrated part of my life that I pack my clothes, I pack my camera gear, I pack my toothbrush, and I pack my food. Like it goes right along there. It's not like an afterthought at all. Like it's certainly a forefront type thought,
Mm-hmm.
And not only just packing food. So that means snacks and or meals for the plane, right? So I don't just have like, my bag of vegan jerky and, a granola bar. I go to the store and buy like prepared foods that I can keep in my backpack with a fork, with napkins, like have it all ready so that I can actually have a proper meal that is good and healthy and nutritious and everything on the plane. And then, I've eaten the same breakfast for more than 10 years. And so I like prepare my little bags of oatmeal and with my chia seeds, flax seeds, hemp seeds. As soon as I land, I'm like at the grocery store to pick up my peanut butter and my berries and other things. And I use an app called Happy Cow it's like kind of like a veggie food finder, I call it. It's basically like Yelp for, vegan or vegetarian restaurants and stuff. And so I'll look ahead of time where I'm going on that app and like jot down things close to the airport or close to where I'm staying or close to the photo shoot. And even like on photo shoot day, like I already know what restaurant I'm going to midday on my all day photo shoot. Like I know which place is close by that I can get food that's going to taste good, fit my dietary needs, and be close by, sustainable, et cetera, healthy. So basically it's like just so integrated. And the way that I always explain it to people, like, and some people might say like, man, that's a lot of extra work, right? But the way I explain it to people is when you're a specialist in something, you're not going to settle. So for instance, we're photographers.
Yeah.
If your camera breaks in the middle of a shoot, you're not going to go to Walmart. You're going to go to a camera store. It's going to be a little bit further.
Right.
It's going to take a little longer. It's going to be more expensive, but you wouldn't even second guess going to Walmart to get whatever like kit camera they have on that shelf there, right? That's not even in the question. Same thing for me. Like it's not in the question of I'm just going to like go to McDonald's and order fries because those are vegan. You know what I mean? Like that's not part of the equation. It's not even register in my brain. So just the way that I've lived for the last 10 years being vegan, it's so much a part of who I am and my routine that I'm using that app. I'm preparing my foods. Like I know which restaurants to go to. And even if they're more expensive or they're out of the way or whatever, like doesn't even register.
Going back to earlier when you mentioned like watching the YouTube videos, like learning things from there, like so there's somebody out there that's going to watch this and be like, hadn't thought about that.
Yeah.
Like preparing for, taking care of yourself while you're on the road. Like me, I just started taking care of myself like a couple months ago. So I'm still pretty new at it, but I had to think about that as well. It's like, well, I have been sick for the last week, so I haven't exercised at all. So I already feel kind of like crap from that. Like I don't know what my shoot days are going to be while I'm out here because of the weather. So it's like I have to plan all around that. I know that there's like two types of foods that I eat like habitually. It's like Chipotle and any kind of Asian food or Chinese food. So it's like I had to plan for all those things. I didn't do a very good job of it, but I knew that okay, in the mornings I can go to Planet Fitness. I can do all these things. It's like I didn't think about those things before. Is my point. So it's like with all this travel I've been doing that I've had coming up, like that's another thing that I have to add in. So it's like I also can't go do a trip and shoot like the next day. Like I need at least a buffer of at least a half a day. Like if I fly in that day, there's no way I'm shooting that same day.
Yeah.
Like it's got to be the next day.
And I
later
think
in the day.
knowing that and being able to tell it to your client confidently, and when I say confidently, not what I'm talking about is tell them with like the authority of like, this is the way it needs to be and this is why, and it's going to benefit you.
Yeah.
Because I'm not going to be at my best creatively, physically, mentally, whatever, if I show up and do this. So this is the way it needs to be. And I know that from experience.
Yeah.
And I think they will respect that. So going back to that call I had today about the school, they want 25 to 30 photos. And normally I tell people like 20 to 25 is kind of my cap. And so previously I told them, being that most of it's going to be exterior, because that's what he said in the original email, most of it's exterior and some drone, which, is less setup time than like tripods and, multiple exposures and everything. I told him if we do a scout day, I think we can push it to 25 to 30 in that one day. However, excuse me, burrito's coming through. When he showed me like the PDF deck that they put together, like their, preliminary shot list or whatever to talk to me about these things, it was a lot of like interior classrooms with tons of chairs everywhere and like, larger rooms with moving parts and pieces and everything. And so looking at that, I was able to tell him, hey, I know I said this, but like, let's set realistic expectations. Like, because there's a lot of classrooms, like now we're talking about, okay, we either need to, really have our shit together and be dialed on scout day so we can be prepared, or we might need to push it to 2 days, which is, of course is gonna bring up the budget a little bit.
Yeah.
And I was able to say that without beating around the bush in a way that he was just like, oh, okay, yeah, I understand. As opposed to before I might have been like, oh crap, like this is gonna raise the rate by whatever my creative fee is because adding an extra day. Is he going to go for that? Like I might shy away from it or kind of, dance around that topic because I'm scared that the price is going to, scare him away or something, right? And so now I'm just like, oh, this is the way it's going to be. And I think because he sees that I'm experienced enough to tell him that, he respects me enough to agree to it without balking at the price at all.
Yeah. That's interesting because at one point I would have been like, instead of that, I would have been more concerned and like trying to figure out how I could accomplish it within the parameters that we've already set instead of proposing, hey, we need more time or it's going to cost more to do that.
And I got the feeling based off our previous email conversations and the call today that he wasn't really concerned about the budget, which is always great. But I did throw in there, a third option that we haven't discussed in addition to scouting and adding an extra day is, if we don't think that can happen, we can bring in an assistant. That way they can help move all the chairs, carry gear, et cetera. And again, from prior experience, I was able to throw another thing out there that, showed him my experience, which was, hey, when I say it's a big full day, that means like 7 a.m. to 7 p.m.-ish, not 9 to 3. Because some people might think a full day is like, the people at the school, like it's a high school that we're going to be shooting, it might be like, oh, well, a full day for our school is this. Or, our faculty arrives an hour before the kids and leaves an hour after the kids. So like, is that the parameters? Because that exact thing happened with an office. Like it was supposed to be a 2-day shoot to get, I think, 30 or a couple more, a little bit more than 30 photos. And at the pretty much like after months and months and months of trying to plan and schedule this, the office manager was like, there's no way I can fit Saturday and Sunday back to back in the same weekend, and it's basically just gonna have to be one day. Like it's not gonna happen unless we just do it one day. I was like, okay, well at least we did the scouting. We've got a pretty detailed shot list. Like you guys are bringing like 12 people from your staff to help out. So we'll do as much as we can in one day. And we get there, and he's like, yeah, we got to be out of here by 5. And I'm like, what the hell? Like that just dropped us from like 7 or 7:30 p.m. Like that's losing 2.5 hours.
Didn't that similar situation just happen at an office you did? Where they at the last minute, like shoot day, they basically said, "Oh, we can't shoot the next day," and you had to cram everything into one day.
No, I think it was same one.
Same one.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, to my recollection, I'd only.
Well, no, there was the one where you had like it was like the people you had in motion, and you did a time lapse recording of it. It was like they were on a staired.
Yeah.
That's the same. Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, it was a little bit longer ago, but
okay.
But yeah, like having had that experience of the miscommunication of like what a long full day is, like you need to talk about the number of hours. So, after our call, he sent me a follow-up email and he's like, hey, these are the bullet points that I took away from our conversation that I'm going to now discuss with our design team so that we can plan accordingly, And again, I really think that my experience showed, and in his initial email to me, just reaching out to say, hey, we found your website. We want to talk to you about shooting this project. He said, we're searching around for photographers, getting a feel for their experience and their pricing. And so I think knowing that he was looking for my experience, I was able to throw that in there enough to have him, want to work with me.
We're constantly talking about pricing and sales calls and how we handle certain situations like this. Like, how often are you changing things? Is it changing with each potential job that comes up, every other job? Like, because as we learn these new things, how much
changing things in my sales process?
Let's say your sales process for now. Like,
I don't think much. Like, I know you talk about like you record some of your, or maybe all of your sales calls and like analyze them. I've never recorded any of mine to like listen to myself. Although I think I might start trying to do that.
I'll show you a couple of mine just so you can see what.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't really know if I change anything. It's just I tailor the conversation to that particular job or client, maybe.
Okay.
But I don't feel like anything really changes. Like I, ask them to tell me about the project. Kind of is like the first thing, and then it, essentially that leads into like my process of shooting, which leads into the pricing.
Okay.
And
well, what's been the most impactful thing that like you've picked up along the way that you continue to use that is kind of, I don't want to say that's successful every time for you because it obviously depends on the client and the circumstances, but like what's one thing that like a best practice, I guess, in your sales process that you kind of just consistently implement that you feel good about?
I don't even know if I can answer that because I don't think I'm as analytical.
You need to record your yeah.
And maybe like I almost don't even view them as sales calls, which maybe I should more. Because in my mind, like I'm not really trying to sell them on me necessarily because they're either going to like my work and my process or my price. Like there's the TV show called The Profit where he talks about people, process, and product. And it's like, all right, if you like my product enough to call me, like you've already seen my work, like cool, check that one off. If I explain my process to you and that works for you, it is what it is. Like my process doesn't really change. It's how I work. I mean, there's minor things that I can change, like, with, okay, if you can't be on site and I need to like, show you 10 photos and you pick your best 5, like that's slightly a deviation from my process. Like we can maybe work with that, right? But for the most part, my process is my process. And then the person, like once they've had a 20-minute conversation with me, they hopefully know whether or not they want to spend the day with me or, do business with me. And so.
You don't think that's selling though? Or you don't look at that as selling?
I guess not because, I mean, I'm just doing what I do. Like it's just who I am. And I don't know, maybe I should look at it as selling.
Well, I mean, the way I look at I guess I know what you're saying because I didn't really look at it as selling either.
Yeah.
It was more just a conversation. And,
right.
And you want people to, I don't know, like, and trust you. And you try to do that in the course of a 10, 15-minute long conversation.
Right.
So it's like a getting to know. It's like speed dating, essentially.
Yeah.
But at the same time, to your point, it's like they already have looked at my work. They probably have a decent understanding of where the price is going to be, but most people are still price shopping if you're on a call with them because they're getting to know you and they're probably going to interview other people. And, they already like your work and they're on a call with you. So it's really, now you're kind of selling yourself, I
also feel like if they're on a call with me, they're investing their time.
Yeah.
And so if they didn't like a couple of the other things throughout the email correspondence before that, or, based on my website or whatever, then the longer I can keep on the phone, the more they're invested in me, which time is money, right? So
yeah,
the more time they spend with me, it's the less time they spend with other people, and they don't want to waste that time. So if they've already spent 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 40 minutes on a call with me, and they have to go do that with somebody else, then that's wasted time with me, and time is money. So in my eyes, I almost look at, I don't know what I'm trying to explain, but.
No, I see what you're saying. It's like they're already invested.
Yeah.
It's not so much a sell at that point. It's more just like sealing the deal kind of thing.
Or I mean, is it a good fit, Like, will I be able to deliver what they need the way they need it? And again, I think the process is a big part of that. So I guess maybe if I'm, trying to think about your exact question and actually trying to give you an answer, explaining my process, I think, is part of my selling point. Because even the guy today, I was telling you earlier in the car, like, he said, okay, can you explain your process? Because we've had people do this and we've had people do this. And he kind of like left a ... And the way he explained those first two processes is not how I work. And it almost sounded like he wasn't too stoked on that.
On the way you do it?
On the way that he explained that previous photographers had done it.
Got it.
And so I was like, well, you know, you mentioned this and then this, and I'm even a little bit further than that. So let me explain what I do. And it was kind of like, oh, okay, good. And I guess in that same part of the conversation, I guess like that's one of my big sales points is my process. Because what I've heard from a lot of clients, this is sort of a segue into another topic. So I'm going to do a little sidebar here.
Sure.
I talk about this with my consulting clients a lot, where there's like tiers of clients, right? So you've got like the single person, you know, architecture firm or interior designer, where like they're, you know, a one-person company. They're going to have a certain experience level with their photographers and with what they're willing to pay, et cetera. And on top of that, you've got, you know, the people that is maybe a husband and a wife team where they have like one or two assistants, or, you know, there's a couple people in the company. And then you've got a company a little bit bigger than that they've got a small office locally. And then on top of that, you've got a, you know, place with a big office and multiple employees, et cetera. And kind of as you go up those tiers, each person has their different experience levels with photographers and often price points that goes along with that. And so what I've found is that as you work your way up the tier, you find people that have worked with enough photographers that they've experienced different processes. And the people at the bottom, they don't either know better or don't really care or haven't had enough experiences to know, hey, this is what I did and it doesn't work well for me. And so the people at the top that I'm targeting now, or not the very top necessarily, but higher up the tiers, I can say to them, in my experience, I've had a lot of conversations with people that say, I worked with a photographer, they shot 100 photos and sent them all to me and said, pick the ones you want me to edit. And I know that's overwhelming. You don't know how to sort through them. It's, you know, figuring out why this one looks different when this one is, you know, it's confusing, it's overwhelming. I know other people have said, you know, they get 20 photos, but out of those, they're still like, oh, did you have one like this, but with the stools pulled back a little bit? Or did you have one like this without the bowl of apples on the counter? And so essentially, like, if you shoot these ways in these other processes that some photographers work with, it's going to be overwhelming and you're not going to end up with the type of photos that you're truly happy with. There's going to be something that you're unhappy with or that doesn't work for you. So the way that I do it, my process is we work together on site, and instead of overwhelming you, you help select the composition, you help with the staging. We're going to take a lot more time per individual photo, so we're going to end up with less photos throughout the day. But if we end up with 10, they're going to be 10 perfect ones that you helped curate and that fit your needs exactly. And so that part of the sales process, I think, is maybe what helps set me apart, or in my opinion, like what I feel like is my selling point. And if they don't like that process, then maybe we're not a good fit to work together.
Do you think that I guess prevents you from getting some work because you kind of require them to be there on location?
It might. And, you know, if they say like, oh, I don't want to be there or I can't be there or whatever, then we can start the conversation down a different road. Most people seem to, at least for anything that involves interiors, interior spaces, most people seem to appreciate that and like it. You know, I don't know if I've had a conversation with anybody that's like, you know what, I'd rather you send me 100 photos and just let me pick. Because when I explain that, you know, it seems like when I explain the 100 photos and the, you know, other ways of shooting, they start nodding their head, they get it. And a lot of them have been through that before. So I'm speaking their language, because instead of them telling me that they've done that before, I'm already telling them, like, I know you've had this happen before, right? Let's make sure that doesn't happen again. There are times, especially with like a commercial exterior, where the client can't be there, doesn't want to be there, or whatever. And that is a slightly different conversation, because for the most part, the client can say, hey, there's a big high-rise tower. We need a picture from the east side, or the side that faces the ocean, or the side that faces the mountain, whatever. Or they'll have, you know, their renderings or their drawings. If it's a high-rise tower, they have renderings. You know what I mean? Like that's the level of client you're at that point. So they know what angles they want to capture. And so they've got lots of detailed bullet points to help direct me.
Yeah.
But if that's the case, the conversation is slightly different still, because I did this recently where they only had like a week notice. They couldn't have anybody here. They did have the detailed shot list, but the conversation went, okay, because I've done this before and I know the hurdles that we're going to face by you not being there, I'm going to require a scout day ahead of time. And I don't think, I charged them for the scout day, but I also charged them a little bit extra on the creative fee because they were going to have to go through that selection process. Because on my end, if I shoot 30 photos and they get to select, well, that's extra time on my end of like processing it, sending them to them, dealing with the back and forth of the selection process, which I don't like. So I'm just going to charge a little bit more for that. And it's not a line item.
Yeah.
It's just, built into the creative fee, and that creative fee is a little bit higher in that point.
Did you figure this out did you just like come up with this on the fly, or did you have this as part of your process? If this scenario comes up,
yeah, good question.
Probably how I'm going to deal with it.
Yeah, good question. It was more or less on the fly for sure, because after having the conversation and phone call with the guy and realizing what it would entail, I essentially was just like, I'm going to give you a quote now.
Yeah.
So that's the other part of my sales point. That's a good segue into this, because I don't like to give a rate sheet. I have a rate sheet and I give rate sheets sometimes, but I like to be able to give a custom quote for most things whenever possible. And I think part of the sales process is giving that quote, and the fact that I'm experienced enough to know what goes on the quote, and the fact that mine looks good and has my branding and my logos and everything on it. I think even though it sounds simple, right? Like just sending a quote, like doesn't everybody do that? But not necessarily.
Yeah.
If they're talking to 3 people and I give them a nice PDF quote that has everything broken down, and the other person sends them a rate sheet and the other person just jots down a number in an email body, I look more professional out of those couple people, right? So for that scenario, again, the guy told me nobody's going to be there. It's a tight deadline. We're going to need to make the selections or whatever. And so at that point, I'm just like, okay, well, this is deviating from my original process. My base rate is for my process. This is different than my process. It's going to require more work for me. It's going to be a little bit more rushed. Just mark up the fees.
They're putting you in a position where you have to create a whole custom process just for them, and there's an upsell, there's an upcharge for that.
Yeah, exactly.
I was just talking with Brian about the pricing thing, like sending. So I also don't send rate sheets unless it's like, if it's a client that I know I'm probably not going to get the job, and I really don't feel like putting all the effort into like making a custom proposal, I'll just either type in my rate, like it's going to be like $2,700 or whatever, or here's a copy of my rate sheet, and I just know I'm never going to hear from him again. Sometimes I do though, and it works in my favor. It's rare, but but we were also talking about the professionalism. Like he's like, I send a rate sheet because it makes me appear more professional. I was like, yeah, but if you're not gonna get the job anyway, or if you don't think you're going to get the job anyway, it doesn't matter if you come off as professional to those people. I don't know. It's an interesting discussion, because I think in hindsight, because you never know, that client could come back in the future and say, now we have the budget for stuff like this. Maybe I need to rethink that, because if I'm just sending...
Or they can talk to people. True. And where I live on a small island. So people jump from company to company. So maybe they're working here now and see that rate and it's too high for them, but next month they're jumped to a different company that has a bigger budget.
Yeah.
So.
Or down the road, again, people are going to remember how you made what's that saying, that people are going to remember how you made them feel?
Yeah.
Or whatever the saying is. But like, yeah, if you're sending them just like I do, just a short email response with it's going to cost this much and like no context, then they're going to remember that. And if down the road they do have the budget, it's just going to, it's not going to work in my favor.
And don't get me wrong, I do send rate sheets still sometimes, like, especially if people specifically ask for it, because what I don't like is, for me in the sales process, like if I'm asking somebody a question and they beat around the bush and start asking me a bunch of questions and all this stuff, and it's like, all I wanted to know was this, or like, why can't you just be direct with me? I don't like that. So if somebody specifically says like, do you have a rate sheet? Most of the time I'll just say yes and send them the rate sheet and, say, I'd love to talk to you more about whatever you have in mind.
Yeah.
Because at that point I kind of know they're just kicking tires or whatever. But I think even before I send in the rate sheet, I probably also do a little bit of research. So I'll click on their website, and because I actually have 2 rate sheets, like one a little bit lower, one a little bit higher price point for the creative fee, based on how big the company is, how big their reach is going to be, how valuable the photos are going to be to them.
You should also make one based on where they're located too.
What do you mean?
Well, like for me, I've got that as well, but I have one for Nashville or the larger cities, and then I have one for where I'm living now, in the Nashville area. So I didn't mean to derail you.
That's okay. So if they look small, I send them the rate sheet. If they look big, I send them the other rate sheet. If they look really big, then it's like, okay, well, let's talk about what you really need. Because at that point, it's going to be the custom thing where they're not going to be there, or, it's a big tower project or something that's like not kind of standard,
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. See, I kind of take so I'll just explain my process briefly. I switched my website to where it's basically a questionnaire, and it's an optional questionnaire. They don't have to fill it out. Like the main contact form is name, email address, message. And then once they go to hit next or whatever to submit it, it has a bunch of questions and it says these are completely optional. It says, like, what's your budget? How many photos are you looking? How long do you want, how much time you want to budget for? It has basically a whole questionnaire. It would essentially be the questions that I would ask them. And I would say since I've implemented that, like probably 75% of the people fill out the majority of that stuff.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
I would think that almost nobody would do it. I would never fill it out.
I wouldn't think so either. And the only reason I even started doing that was I noticed another photographer in the area when I was stalking websites to see what other people were doing. They were doing something similar to that. It was a little less structured as mine was, but mine is like, I'm going to ask you these questions anyway when we talk. So if you'd like to think about these now and put these ranges in. And then, so I guess where I'm going is I don't just tell them it's going to cost this unless I don't think I'm ever going to work with them. That's the part I need to change the way I think about that. But generally what I will say so that they don't feel like because I don't like that either, where it's like, I just want to know what the price is. Don't make me call you. Don't make me do this. Yeah. What I've learned, and I learned this from Blair Enns, he wrote the book, The Win Without Pitching Manifesto, and he also has a course. He has a sales program for creatives called Win Without Pitching. What he suggested in one of his podcasts was essentially give them a range. So like when I get a email inquiry that I think could be a serious quote, I'll essentially say, a project based on the information you've given me so far, a project like this could cost anywhere between $5,500 and $9,000. I'd really like to narrow this down for you. Do you have some time to hop on a call so I can get you a number? So I'm kind of giving them, one, I'm anchoring kind of high and setting the expectations very high. And then if they say yes, we can hop on a call, and it kind of lets me know ahead of time, oh, they have a high budget between these numbers. So that lets me know going into the call, okay, well, I might be able to sell this one a little bit higher. I might be able to mark my rate up. Yeah. And that's how I've sold a lot of these higher paying jobs, because I start with that range instead of just telling them an actual price. Yeah. And again, these are only for jobs that I think could be legit and actually come through. Right. And most of the time it works. Yeah.
That's a really big range, right?
Yeah.
So for me, it's almost like, how do you even guess that range?
Like, well, let's do it. Let's do an experiment right now. I'm going to read you an email that I got. Let's pretend it's coming to you.
Okay.
And I'd be curious to hear how you would respond to this.
Yeah. Good.
Okay, so this email came from somebody. They didn't fill out the entire questionnaire, but they're from a roofing company. And they basically said, hi, I'm needing some pictures made at some of our job sites. We are located in Athens, Alabama. Some of you probably got the job because I sent them a really high number. Please let me know if this is something you could do, and pricing, please. And then for the questionnaire, the only information they gave me was they want to shoot it on April 3rd. They want up to 20 images, and they want video. And for cost sharing parties, they're not sure. So the questions that I asked them are the project name, the address, project website if there is one, shoot date, how many days and images, do they want video, what's their approximate budget, and I have got a range. And then I asked them if they're able to sign an agreement and pay a 50% retainer. It's a yes or no question. And then they can put any cost sharing parties. And then if they want to be published. So they can fill out all that information. So the only information they gave me was they want up to 20 photos. It's a roofing company in Alabama, and they want video. So how would you respond to an email that came through like that?
First, I would look at their website, and when I think roofing company, I'm automatically thinking somebody very small. And typically the tradespeople like that, in my experience, don't want high quality photos. They don't need them. They don't see the value in them, and they certainly don't want to pay for them.
Right.
So if I look at it and it's like, oh wait, this is like a super high end roofing company that has like high quality architectural materials, and they're selling their products to all the big developers in Alabama now, Now that's a different story, maybe. Because even a company like that, I had a company reach out. There's like this massive new wave pool that's about to open. That's like, a man-made wave in Hawaii. It's like this wave park. It's like a surfing training facility. And a company reached out because they have some like metal panels, like architectural materials, these panels that are going to be on there. And they reached out like a long time ago. And I've recircled back with them recently because the place is about to open. Said, hey, do you want to revisit this conversation? Like, oh yeah, we still need some photos of our panels. And I, gave them like my base rates. And they're like, oh, we were like thinking it'd be like a couple $100. So even like what I would think is like expensive architectural materials that are selling to big multi-million-dollar projects, even they don't even necessarily want to pay for good photos. So had you not said roofing company, it might be a different discussion, but a roofing company, I honestly probably would have sent them like my rate sheet and said, here you go, because I would assume we're not even in the same ballpark and like not even gonna have the conversation.
Right. Well, for me, what was telling on that was, I had that same stereotype about the roofing company thing. And also that they put, there was something else about this that stood out. I can't remember what it was. Was it that they wanted video?
For me, I think it was the way it was worded. Read the email again, and I'll tell you.
Hi, I am needing some pictures made at some of our job sites.
Right there.
Yeah,
some of the job sites.
Yeah.
The fact that he said some of our job sites and then put a specific date and said about the number of photos that he wanted makes me think that he doesn't really know how this works.
Yeah.
Because he's thinking you're going to drive to job sites the way he does. Because if he has 10 job sites in Alabama, he can go visit them all in a morning, right? Mm-hmm. And like just drive to each house, and he like goes and checks on his crews or whatever. That's the way that he's envisioning visiting a job site. Whereas you are going to shoot like one project, maybe two in a day, and you're going to take time to like make these photos or whatever. So like just the wording made me think like, okay, he's doesn't know what he's talking about or doesn't have enough experience working with photographers to know the lingo and the jargon that we speak. Mm-hmm. And so therefore that mixed with the roofing company makes me think.
Well, that and the fact that they put all these other details, but they didn't bother to select the budget option, which is a pretty generous thing. I think I have it like up to $1,500, $1,500 to $2,500. It was like, it's pretty a generous range. So they didn't even bother to touch that. They didn't even bother to select whether or not they would sign an agreement and pay a retainer. Those were the two things that were telling for me as well.
So I kind of like this game. I'm going to pull up one for that call that I went on today. I'll pull up the original email that guy sent me.
Sure.
Because I think it's interesting to see. This was the original email, and it says, first of all, this went to my spam, which I'm glad that I check it like pretty much daily. The subject line is general inquiry, which seems pretty generic and like might get overlooked, but I'm really glad I clicked on it. So here we go. Hi, Adam. We came across your website through a recommendation of one of our colleagues in our Hawaii office. We have begun preliminary discussion around photography of a project we're completing at a high school on Oahu and are reaching out to local photographers to get an idea of their experience and rates. Do you happen to have an educational portfolio you can share? Have you worked on campus with kids/teachers? Do you have a rate sheet or base rates we can review? We're hoping to photograph the project with class in session and are potentially targeting the fall for a photo shoot. So
I would have, the minute that email would have come through, my first thing would be like, yes, this is dollar signs. Like I know this is going to happen. I'm going to sell this thing. I'm going to make it happen.
Yeah, exactly. And so immediately I recognized the name of the studio and I was familiar with the firm, and I just like went and checked out their website and Instagram just to make sure like, yep, that's them, like they're legit. But so many things in here are the opposite of the roofing email in terms of, hey, we have experience, we know what we're looking for. So just to break it down, first of all, they came across my website through a recommendation of our colleagues. So cool, my marketing is working locally in Hawaii. So somebody in Hawaii for this firm sees my stuff, knows my stuff, and is able to like pass it along to, the corporate wherever else they're located.
At some point, I would take a note of that and find out who that was.
Oh yeah. Say like, who is this? I can thank them or whatever.
Yeah, thank them and then,
Then we've begun preliminary discussions around photography of a project we're completing on a high school, blah, 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 reaching out to local photographer to get an idea of their experience and rates. So the fact that they want somebody with experience is a good sign. The fact that they're doing it preliminarily and they're looking at something for the fall when this is, February they're sending this or early March or whatever, that tells me they are planning ahead, they got their ducks in a row, and they expect good things. And again, just looking at their Instagram and website, I understand that they, have good quality work. Then they said, do you happen to have an education portfolio you can share?
And you're already thinking about that.
And have you worked on campus with kids and teachers? And then, so that part, it's like, okay, well, they're asking for a specific portfolio of education, which, if you don't shoot commercial stuff, you might not even realize that education is a subsector of like commercial. So you've got, institutional, which is, government buildings or, churches or something like that. Education, which is schools, essentially. You've got medical or hospitality, so hospitals or hotels.
Was this an architect? I can't remember. Did you say that?
Yes, architect. Okay. And so the fact that they kind of have that subsector, again, tells me like they're experienced enough to know of the little sectors within, the commercial architecture stuff. And then have I worked with kids and teachers, again, looking for my experience. And then do you have a rate sheet or a base rates we can review? So they're kicking tires, window shopping a little bit, but they know enough other questions to ask ahead of time. So first thing is, first thing is, woohoo, ring the bell, right? But they asked, do I have an education portfolio? I don't have an education portfolio. I have a residential and a commercial. But what I did was I went back to my archives and pulled out, one campus building that I shot pretty in detail. And because they were specifically looking for kids and teachers, and they said they wanted it in session. So in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, they want people walking in the shots. And I went to their website, and on the photos of schools, there's people walking in the shots. So I know what they're looking for at this point. Mm-hmm. So I go back and find, this one campus building and look for shots that specifically have people in them, put all those together, realize, there's actually 2 other or maybe 3 other, shots that I have from a different campus that, have 1 or 2 people in each shot. Cool, put those in. And then just to show them a few more photos with people in them that's not a school, I went and got a couple other commercial exteriors of like condo buildings that have people walking on the sidewalks and stuff. Put all those together. And important to note about this, when I put them together, I think it was like 12 photos, I named the files, put them in order that I wanted them to view them in, named the files of like their architecture firm -sample. So it's not like project A, project B, project C, like all kind of mishmashed in there, right? Yeah. So now it looks like I've taken time to curate this for them, right? And then
not only that, you're also addressing every one of their specific concerns without giving them exactly like a school portfolio. You're saying you're essentially saying I don't have a school portfolio, but you brought this particular thing up.
Yep.
Here's this. Here's this. Here's this.
Exactly, and that's exactly what I said. So I said, I don't have a school or an education portfolio that I can send you a link to, but I've attached photos here that blah, 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 like we just said.
Yeah.
And then for them, instead of just giving them my rate sheet, I said, before I give you my rates, like, let me ask you a few more questions, because they were looking for experience. So I wanted to show them that I had the experience that we were talking about earlier in this conversation. So I went back and asked, and they asked about shooting with kids. So I was able to say last month I actually shot a school while I was in session, but we didn't really have interaction with the kids. They weren't in the shots, but I have been on a campus with kids and teachers, just to show them like, I don't have something on my record that will prevent me from doing that,
Yeah.
And then, so I explained my rates are based off a creative fee and a licensing fee per photo. And if there's additional parties, we can do cost sharing. But before I send over rates or a quote, I've got these couple of extra questions. So the questions were, do you anticipate needing to scout the location ahead of time? Will there be somebody from your team there with me to help direct? And do you know the approximate number of photos you want to produce? And then I had mentioned like in the paragraph before that about the cost sharing. And when he replied to those questions, he didn't mention that. So I quickly followed up and said, oh yeah, by the way, like, are there any other parties that will, need these? And he actually said, yes, like we plan to gift a fee to the licensing fee to the school. So we're going to cover that. Right. And there'll be at least one other one. And so by asking those questions, again, I think that shows my experience, right?
Yeah.
And he was able to answer those. I did a custom quote. Basically, he said, quote looks great. We'd like to work with you. Can we hop on a call? And so that's the call we had today.
That's a best case scenario, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like, so the way I would have handled that email, I pretty much would have done the same exact thing, except I probably wouldn't have asked those questions through email. It worked out in the end for you on this, but I probably would have wanted to ask those questions on the phone.
Okay.
Only because I want to again, I try to give them a range up front. If they're specifically asking for pricing, I'll give them a range, and it's kind of a broader range, but I anchor kind of high. And again, I should also say that I don't have hard and fast rules. I have to feel every single email out or every single call I get out, and it's gonna be based on like the words they use, like the fact that he used the word like preliminary,
Right.
Like big words like that, big words. It lets me know I'm not dealing with some intern. No offense, interns,
guy.
but yeah, you know what I mean. Like it's somebody they're professional.
Yeah.
It's well thought out, like you said. The one thing that also stood out to me was how basically they're shopping around for other photographers. So it's like, instead of all the pricing stuff, I'm thinking more like, okay, there's competition. I have to set myself apart. So like what, and then I start asking myself like, okay, what is it that I am building my business off of? So one of the things I decided probably about 1.5 years, 2 years ago, and I actually put this in my rate sheet. Like the first sentence says, I thrive on a flexible, I do my best work, or I thrive on a flat fee, something to this effect. I'm building my whole business on being easy to work with. So I try to communicate that in every interaction that I have, whether it's through email or talking to them in person. So again, the faster I can get them on the phone to talk with them and ask those questions, because I don't know, I would rather them hear me ask them than them misinterpret my tone through email, because I've had that happen to me in the past where it's like, I'm either just looking like, they either read it as like incompetent or being rude. I want them to make sure that they understand, like I'm just trying to be flexible. I want to understand them more. So the faster I can get them on the phone and talk to them, the more it usually works out in my favor. And I'm not saying that's the way to do it. I just think for me, my personality, I'm like email conscious. So every time I send an email, I think I'm being rude. You know what I mean? It just comes off as rude, because I also read emails as rude a lot of times. So if I can talk to them and communicate the body language and tonality in my voice, and get a feel for how they're talking to me, I usually get those jobs. It's very rare where I don't like secure a job that I actually get on the phone with them.
Yeah.
So my strategy, I guess, a long-winded way of saying, like, to get them on the phone as fast as possible, I'm most likely to get the job. If I can't get them on the phone, I'm probably not going to get it. So
yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I felt comfortable asking those questions enough to like put together the quote, knowing that the next conversation might change that quote, which it did. Because again, once I saw the actual shot list and realized that like, oh, there's interior stuff. Because I think he mentioned in the next email that I didn't read to you, like, oh, I think it's mostly exteriors, yada, yada. But then we saw the shot list and it is interiors, and there's those big rooms with all the desks and the computers and like it's a science building. So like science equipment, like whatever. There's a lot of stuff we might have to move around.
Yeah.
So once I saw that, I let him know, like, hey, the quote was for 1 day. It might end up being 2 days. We might need an assistant.
Because you're talking about moving chairs, straightening chairs, equipment's in all over the place, possibly staging people.
Yeah, and they don't know what condition it's going to be in. So they want it during school. So presumably it's going to be in use by teachers and students. We don't know what kind of mess they're going to be making in there the day before, the hour before we arrive.
Yeah.
So who knows what kind of classroom we're walking into. And he did say that from their experience, they want it to be less perfect and more lived in by the end user. So they want it to look like people are in there, but I'm like, you might go too far the other direction. Like it can get pretty cluttered and pretty messy pretty quickly,
Yeah.
And just from experience in terms of that stuff, they might say, oh yeah, we want it to look lived in, until they actually see it. And then they're like, oh crap, what do we do?
Yeah.
And for some reason, it's making me think, I shot this grocery store and we were trying to set up a shot where you can see like all the checkout lines in a row. And it looks super cluttered. And he's like, I don't know if this is even worth it. And I'm like, I think it wouldn't be that bad if we just moved like on each checkout counter, there's like a big giant stack of the paper bags, like brown paper bags.
Yeah.
I was like, I think if we just move the bags, it'll look like way less cluttered. Like, it's a lot of work. And I'm like, you fucking built the whole grocery store. It's going to take us like 3 minutes to move these bags off of here,
Yeah.
And we did it, and he's like, oh yeah. And it went from like what he's viewed as an unusable photo to, oh yeah, this looks okay. Like this is good. Let's make this photo happen.
Yeah, just from some brown bags.
Yeah. And so I guess the reason I bring that up is, again, clients might have a vision in their head of a way something might look, and the clutter or declutter or any amount in between can change the way that they interpret or see the room. And it's kind of like part of my vision to say, no, all we have to do is move these things. It doesn't take a lot of effort, and this room will look completely different. Or put them back in to make it look more lively or whatever.
Do you feel like with your process, and I'm talking again about the sales process, or not even necessarily the sales process, just the way that, because I've heard, you've shared sales calls that you've done in the past. Granted, those were from several years ago when you were talking about, cost sharing and licensing or whatever. But do you find that your process, because I know you to be somebody who like has a lot of structure in your life. You also have a lot of structure in your business. All your collateral, your emails, everything is very structured and organized, clean, very branded. Do you find that if there's one thing you feel, is there anywhere in your business or your process that you feel is getting in your own way? Like if you had to think about it, or are you not really thinking about that at all? Like, do you feel like there's something that you struggle with that is either preventing you from getting new business or preventing growth or preventing, because, like we see videos you put out, we have conversations with you, you know what you're talking about. You give a lot of like super sound advice. It's very well thought. You got a lot of experience. So I think like we got a picture of Adam Taylor, the guy in Hawaii is out together, who's grown a successful business. But like, what's one thing in your business that you feel is like maybe holding you back?
That's an interesting question. I certainly don't have an answer right off the top of my head. I'm curious, like you know me pretty well, and like you see me from your perspective. I don't know, you tell me. Like, well, if you were consulting me, like what would you say, like, dude, you gotta really work on this?
Well, the question that I was trying to ask you ahead of time is like, I wonder sometimes if your structure gets in your own way.
Whoa.
So I guess my clumsy way of asking you, do you feel like having that much structure could be maybe a deterrent in some
like maybe I'm too inflexible?
Yes.
I don't think so, because I don't think I would want those jobs that don't fit in my structure. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. It's an interesting thing to think about, and it would require a little bit more reflecting and kind of pondering over time maybe. But my initial thought when you say that is the way that I works for me. And I don't want to say if it doesn't work for you, screw off, I'm not going to work with you.
Right.
But in a way, I work my best this way, and I want to do my best work. And so in order for me to do my best work, this is how I do it.
Yeah.
And if I can't do my best work, then I don't want to do the work. And I'm willing to turn down a lot of work. Thankfully, I've got a couple other income streams with the licensing thing and the education thing that I have the ability to turn down some work. And I don't want to chase every opportunity out there. And so I'm willing to tell people no. I mean, I don't know if I even told you this. I recently lost a gig or dropped a gig or whatever. It was construction photos, like construction progress photos.
Yeah.
It was going to be like a 6-month retainer or whatever. And I know I went back and forth with you a little bit about
it.
So essentially what happened, to fill in the listeners here, a development company reached out. They wanted construction progress photos of their project over several months. And I worked out in my head like what would be worth my time and energy and what I felt comfortable with and what I felt would be valuable to them and meet their needs. And what I came up with was one site visit a month for X amount of dollars. And per site visit, I would produce roughly 20 photos, or 20 photos I think was what was there, and deliver those 20 photos. It seemed pretty straightforward. And then they came back and they're like, okay, we've got to put you in touch with the construction company because it's an active construction site. There's all this hoops and red tape you got to go through in order to get on the construction site. And I looked at all this paperwork and all this stuff they wanted me to do, and I'm already like, this isn't what I signed up for. I don't even want to shoot construction photos. Like, I want to shoot finished projects. I want to make beautiful art. Construction is not beautiful art. Like, in my mind, I'm sure somebody can make it. I'm sure it can be, but it's not the art that I make. Yeah. It's not my specialty. It's not what I want to do.
Might be an interesting challenge for you, though.
Maybe, but at the time, I didn't have interest in it. I was just going to do it for the money and to build a relationship with that company in hopes that I shoot the final photos. And it was the beginning of the year where it's like, man, I need money because historically the beginning of the year is always slow. Cool, let's do this 6-month contract. everything's looking good. Then they send me all this paperwork from the construction company. I start to begin to jump through those hoops, and then like we get towards the very end of we're about to go on site finally and make this first shoot happen a month later because of all the paperwork. And then they're like, oh, wait a minute, like we can't give the photos to the construction company and the building and this and this. And I was like, well, typically with project photos, like we would, charge more for this and yada, yada. And here's what I would normally do for project photos. But since it's construction, I'm willing to do it for less. So if you, need to be able to distribute the photos to everybody, pay 1.5 times instead of 3 times or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And she basically said, we don't have it in our budget for any more than this. And that was it. I was like, okay, well, I'm sorry, we're going to have to move on. And I was willing to lose that based on my structure and not being flexible enough. And so that was...
Would that have been a couple $1,000 revenue, or would have been significantly more than
like
that?
$7,500.
Okay.
For the progress photos over 6 months. So it was like $1,250 or $1,350 or something like that per month for 6 months. And they were going to pay me all of it up front, which would have been great.
Yeah.
But the fact that I wanted to stick to my guns on, this fee that we agreed on didn't include all the hoops I already jumped through and didn't include extra licenses. I wasn't willing to bend on that. But at the same time, I felt good turning down the work because I didn't want to do this in the first place. And I wanted to be able to stick to the fact that if you're going to be using the photos for more than what we agreed on, you need to pay more. So, that's a one-off situation.
Yeah, but I'm sure you could dig up others that like had similar circumstances where if you didn't stand by your guns and do things the way you want to do them, it would have been a nightmare anyway.
Right. And, there's been times when I've tried to be flexible and try to tailor the conversations or like tailor my work or whatever, my process a little bit more to fit people. Like one that just pops in my head is, this interior designer who had a very natural light type look, and she kind of talked about that, and it almost seemed like she was kind of like pointing at my photos and being like, so you use a lot of flash, huh? Like I kind of like more natural light, as you can see over here, And so after
that's you?
That's kind of the vibe I got, which is fine. She was picking my brain, and I was just trying to get to know her and everything. And so I went back and I found a project or two, a couple photos, whatever, and I emailed her and I was like, hey, just to show you, like, here's some more of my stuff that seems like it fits your vibe a little bit more, to show you that I have this capability. And then I did another project that was, the home was a little bit more her style of home that she designs. And I sent her those photos like in a personal email, just like, hey, I thought about you when I did this. Like, I remember this was kind of more your style,
Yeah.
And so, and she never hired me.
Doesn't matter, but you're still, but it's a good best practice. Again, it's reps, like you're getting practicing, like taking notes of statements that people make in the past and seeing how you can, it's being resourceful with what you have.
But going back to your question, the way that you danced around to land on the question, I am stubborn for sure. And I think historically I've had, certain parts of me that are like egotistical and stuff, which, I'm not always super proud of, but part of it is who I am at a certain point. And I think...
Is it ego? Like, do you identify, self-reflecting, is it ego, or is it just like certainty and like
some parts,
self-awareness? Okay.
But, and just stubbornness of like, I want things to be my way. And, this is kind of going way back, but I remember, early days of me working in the BMX industry, like first job out of college and starting to write out yearly goals for the first time, and specifically writing out like, I have these financial goals or life goals or whatever, but I specifically want to reach them by doing it my way and doing it through what I love. So I want to become a millionaire, but I love BMX and my salary is only $33,000 a year working at this magazine, but I still want to be a millionaire. Yeah. So I need to figure out how I can still keep my job at the magazine instead of going to work on Wall Street for, whatever, just throwing a job out there, right? Like a high paying job. With my drive and skill set and whatever, like my personality, work ethic, I could go apply that to a different type of job and make 10 times the amount of money. But I don't want to do that. Yeah. I want to do it my way because this is what I love and this is what I'm passionate about. And I'm going to figure out a way to make it happen. And I'm not a millionaire yet. I'm 40. I'm not there. But I've continued to do things that make me happy, right? So moved to Hawaii because I want to live that lifestyle. And my expenses raised, which means my net worth, is now slowing down a little bit because my expenses are more, right? I'm saving less, investing less. But I want to do it my way. Yeah. So I can move to a cheaper place and achieve my financial goals quicker, but I want to achieve my financial goals while I'm still living the life that I want to live.
Is millionaire still an actual goal, or has it loosened up to be more of just a financial freedom kind of goal, or do you have like specific?
I mean, it's just an arbitrary number at this point, you know. I mean, I think at the beginning, it was like a number set high, and now that I'm getting close to that number, it's kind of like whatever. Like, and you know, back then I also had the goal of like making $100,000 a year, and once I was like around that number of like breaking that 6-figure mark, it was like, who cares like what the number is really, like, you know. Then it was kind of like the process around it, right, or like breaking it down into smaller chunks. So instead of X amount per year total, now it's like X amount of photo shoots per year at an average price of this point, which would exceed, you know, the dollar amount that I set ahead of time.
We've had a lot of conversations about life and everything. Today we were talking about low points in our career, not our photography career, but just in general, our working lifetime. What would have been, if you had to pinpoint a low point in your photography career as an architectural photographer, like if you had to pick a low point, what would that time have been? Yeah. I think I already know the answer because I know you, but I'd be curious.
I'd be curious to know what you think. Well, so I got to explain where the career started and where it is now. Like, I have to explain a little bit of the journey to pinpoint what comes to my mind, because it started when I started shooting houses. I was shooting for realtors. I didn't even know that there was designers and architects you could work with, right? So I started working with realtors, and very early on got kind of a lucky break and got hired on with this really high-end brokerage in Orange County, LA area, and they were paying me pretty well, $500 a pop, and pretty quickly they were sending me to 2 and 3 houses per day.
For just photos?
Just photos. Okay. 25 photos per package.
How long were you doing that for? I think that's a story that kind of gets skirted over a little bit.
Yeah, sometimes. Not that long. I would have to like look back at my records, but I mean, that little stint might have been like 6 months or so, because it went from 0 to real quick, and I was in over my head and I couldn't keep up with it. Yeah. And so I had like a little bit of, I'm not going to say success, but like financially I was like making a decent amount of money like very quickly shooting real estate. And I thought that's just how it could be. Like, I didn't know any other way. I didn't know that like other people only charge $125 and shoot 10 houses a day or whatever it is, you know? Because I had no Facebook groups to look at, no other people to talk to. Like, I was just on my own trying it out. And when I realized that I was getting burnt out, didn't really love it that much, and then like that client kind of stopped, I went through this long stretch of like, okay, let me try a low price point and do in-camera HDR. Let me try this tactic and price point.
We've all gone through that.
Like, I tried all these different things, and like none of it, I just couldn't figure out the business model. And again, I wasn't looking at Facebook groups. I didn't, look at it as a media company business and scaling. I just wanted to take nice pictures. And I found myself not taking nice pictures, not going to nice houses, not making much money, not enjoying what I'm doing. And I'm like, what the f-? So at that point, for me, that was my low point in the, shooting spaces photography career, because I went from thinking that I was going to be able to do one thing and starting out sort of doing that, because in the beginning, a lot of the houses I went to were pretty nice, and there were some like big, nice mansions, and I was getting $500 a pop and a couple of those a day or several of those per week, paying my bills with that. I went from that to like crappy houses where I walk in and there's a big purple dildo on the table, and this guy's asking me to move all this crap out of the way for him, and these rundown trailers, and like shooting in-camera HDR for $125, and I'm like, neither one of these are sustainable. I can't make a living doing this. And so then it was like, well, what do I do? I don't know. And like, that's when I ended up, doing that other gig I was telling you about. And, I searching Craigslist for different photography gigs. And, through my connections and my network, I would have like one-off little random things here and there. And through my 2 different websites I had going at the time, I would get one-off little inquiries here and there. Like, and there were cool opportunities, like shoot the Formula One race car in Long Beach that like goes around the city. That was cool. It paid decent for, a couple grand for a couple of days of work. But it wasn't like regular, and it wasn't a career path, and, one of the things I call this when I was floundering around, like it was real estate, a lot of floundering around, and then finally like got hooked up with Ardo and like started towards the architecture and design side of things. So during that flounder around period, through searching Craigslist and all these different things, I found a gig with a yearbook company who basically they had yearbook photographers that would go out and shoot the sporting events for the schools, as opposed to the high school kid that doesn't really know how to shoot sports, go out and shoot the football game and the photos are all terrible. So somebody like me who has a professional background shooting X Games and CrossFit Games, I can clearly shoot a sports event. Like I would go out there for $75 a game or whatever and shoot the sports and, you know, deliver the JPEGs or whatever and didn't have to edit or anything. And part of it was fun because I get to watch high school football and, you know, some of the volleyball games were kind of fun to watch, you know? But at the same time, it's like, dude, I used to shoot the best athletes in the world, either on the CrossFit Games or the X Games, and now I'm shooting freaking high school football. And I was just like, what am I doing? Like, where am I going with this career? Like, what's the next thing gonna be, you know? I thought it was gonna be real estate. It's clearly not. And so that floundering around point was just like, that felt low, I guess, in terms of didn't have a direction, didn't know where I was going. Yeah.
Well, what I was going to say, so I was thinking it was going to be more, I was asking specifically about architecture, so I wasn't thinking that.
You weren't thinking that far back.
I was thinking that far back. I was thinking in your architecture photography career, and I can take this out if you want, but I feel like when you moved to Hawaii, like you were kind of like, for a period of there, like you were excited about it, but then there was kind of a scary period, you know, and I was kind of thinking maybe you were going to talk about that a little bit, because I feel like things for a while there for you were not, I don't know if scary is the right word, but it's like stressful. Like you just moved across, you know, the ocean essentially, starting from scratch.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
And so I want to talk more about that. I'm curious, like, would you have guessed that based on our conversations and like how I came across to you?
I would have, so you left a very comfortable, you had a comfortable situation in Southern California.
Yeah.
And I think that, you know, we were dealing with COVID and everything like that. I think we as photographers, when things are good and we feel good about it and we get confident, like we can do this anywhere. And I'm only saying this because I also did the same thing. I moved across the country essentially and I started from scratch. Business was really good where I was at. It was getting better. I was like, I'll just do this anywhere. I'll pick it up. And it's been kind of a difficult year, you know, financially, but you had experienced that like a year before I did. And I just remember having conversations with you where I was like, not worried about you, but like I was telling you, hey dude, start shooting real estate. You know, like, do you remember those conversations? I was like trying to convince you, like, you can make money doing this stuff if you want to, because like the work wasn't coming in, you know.
Yeah. So that's where I'm stubborn, right?
Yeah.
Because I didn't want to shoot real estate.
Yeah.
And that's interesting. So yes, we had those conversations, and yes, there was a time when, you know, it seemed like work was super slow to come in. Meanwhile, my wife, you know, is also self-employed, and, you know, she was having a lower point, so the dual income, both weren't coming in. And so financially, it was kind of stressful, and, you know, I don't know if worried is the right word, but, you know, it was like stressful, right? And so there was a point when I did build up a real estate page on my website and a short-term rental page on my website. I never put them public facing, but if you did a Google search, they might pop up. And if somebody asked about it, I could send you a link to show you, like, here's what I can offer and here's my pricing. Once I did that, I got a couple jobs and I fucking hated them. And one of the first ones that I did, so.
They complained about them, didn't they? Like one of them?
Yeah, so, but the very first one that I did was, even before I even put that webpage up, I think, I took a rental listing for, you know, an apartment rental. It wasn't even short term, but it was a rental listing. And normally people get paid nothing for those. And it was like small, like, I mean, concrete walls, white walls, I mean, unfurnished, like bare bones, like anybody could shoot that for $100 and like, it'd be fine. And I told them my price was $800 and they were like, okay. And I was like, okay, all right, I'll do it. Right. And guess what? I dropped my 24-70 lens when I was on the rooftop getting their views or whatever that they wanted.
Oh, that was a real estate shoot?
Oh. Yeah, and I dropped my 24-70 because normally I'd have the tilt shifts inside, but I was shooting the view, so I had that lens. And dropped, fucking broke the thing, was an $800 repair. It basically, you know, took more to replace the lens or repair the lens than I made. So I was like, okay, to me this is a sign. I said I didn't want to do this work, but I was going to do it because work's slow and I could use the money and it'd be easy. I did it, and look what happened. All right, and then I did like 3 I think 4 Airbnb shoots after I put up that website thing. All of them were just like uninspiring, didn't enjoy it, felt like it was super forced. Got paid, whatever, it's fine, move on. The next real estate listing I did, the chick didn't like the photos, and I just ended up giving her a refund, and I was like, that's it, take the webpage down, I'm done. I gave it a shot. But what's interesting, going back to what you said, it's almost, not that I don't remember that, but I didn't feel like it was a low point. I felt like it was part of the process. And I knew that moving across the ocean to the middle of nowhere, I would have struggles. And I told myself it's going to take at least 2 to 3 years to build my foundation and establish myself here. And I knew that we had, savings in place for when things went slow. And I also know that there's enough companies there, there's enough development and buildings there, and I have the skills to produce good work. So as long as I keep doing what I need to do, it's going to eventually come. And so for me, the challenge was keep telling myself, trust the process, trust the process, trust the process. And some days I had to play it on repeat all day long. And part of it was, and the process being, get out and shoot more stuff. Keep sending emails. Keep up your social media. Market yourself. Go to events. Talk to people. Do all the things you need to do to stay relevant so that, you're visible to people, right? Mm-hmm. And eventually, when people are ready, they'll come. Mm-hmm. Because in my eyes, maybe this is naive, but in my eyes, I don't think it's a stretch to say I'm at least decent, if not good at what I do. I'm not great.
You're fine.
I'm chasing greatness, right? I'm always chasing greatness. I'm good enough at what I do. I can look at my photos compared to other people's. I know they're quality photos. Yeah. So it's just a matter of time before somebody's willing to pay for those quality photos. Mm-hmm. So yes, there were stressful times for sure. And it was a challenge mentally to keep that on repeat of trust the process. But also part of that trust the process was, at a certain point, I had to tell myself, dude, you've done enough. You can't bang your head against the wall all day and hope that an email comes through. Go out and enjoy your life. You moved to Hawaii for a reason.
Dude, that's a really important point.
Yeah, so basically, part of the hard part was getting out of the house and going for a hike, going get in the ocean, going to the beach, going explore, instead of sitting at the computer thinking, who can I send an email to? I hope an email comes in today. What should I post on social media? Just get the fuck out and go do what you came to Hawaii to do. Huh.
That's funny because, I've shared with you some of my similar struggles, but I've literally been documenting. When we moved to Nashville, I'm like, okay, I had the same thoughts. It's going to take a while to build this up. We moved to Nashville, and within 2 weeks, I got, at the time, the highest paying job I'd ever gotten, moving to Nashville. So I was like, cool, confirmation. Sweet. Yeah. And then I was like, I'll shoot real estate, but I'm only shooting luxury real estate that I can shoot at my own pace. I can charge my rate that I want to charge for it. Mm-hmm. And then I can work with just a couple high-end clients that, that will help me kind of network in Nashville. And that get me in nice houses, and I can build a portfolio down there. So I was okay doing that. Mm-hmm. The thing is with me, it's I just enjoy photography. So I don't mind shooting real estate. I don't like the grind of real estate, though. Yeah. I don't like the going and shooting disaster homes. I want to shoot nice, well-designed, well-thought-out homes, and I want to work with cool people. Yeah, that's my main thing. So we moved there, and things are going well. And then I'm not going to get into it now, but we decided to move to North Carolina instead for various reasons. And I'm like, okay, then all of a sudden all my doubts start creeping in because it's we moved to Nashville because the work I want to do is there. And it was looking promising right from the beginning. Mm-hmm. Now I'm going to throw that all away again and move to the Asheville area. And I'm like, okay, well, what do I do? And I fell back and I was like, oh, well, I can start a real estate photography business because I had a successful one in Minnesota and I know how to do it. I can do everything that I did there. I can make $100,000 a year and just shoot real estate and then not worry about architecture. And I started documenting that process in May or June of last year. Just recording, and I built a website, I got the LLC, I did all the things you need to do for a real estate photography business. I built an Instagram page, I posted 3 photos on it, and I literally went from June until probably 3 weeks ago at this point, where I finally decided I'm not doing it. And I didn't do any marketing for my real estate hardly. It took me like 6 months is my point, 6-7 months to like teetering on this, whether or not I want to do real estate photography. And I finally was like, I can't do it anymore.
Yeah.
So it's like, I don't know. It's kind of a parallel story, a different paths, and it took me a little bit longer to get there. But I think finally putting in my flag and saying, you know what, yeah, I'm going to travel to Nashville. I'm going to travel wherever I want to. I'm going to make this work, because I left Minnesota, where things were finally starting to pick up, in order to go do this thing somewhere else. Yeah. So it's like I have a chance to do a fresh start. There's plenty of clients. Like I'm within 2 to 3 hours from like 5 or 6 major cities. Like there's no reason I can't do this. So I don't know, for me, a low point, and because I was to you guys and everybody like last year about how I wasn't getting any shoots, and I was like, I was worried about it. It was like, I just felt like here I threw everything I had away. Like this successful real estate photography business and architecture photography business that was growing, and it's like nothing's coming through. So I don't know where I was going with all that, but I think I was just trying to relate a little bit. Like,
so the other thing is that, again, like just like in the BMX days where I wanted to make my money doing my own path. So, okay, clearly my salary is not going to increase that much. So what else can I do? I started hustling and trying to, license my photos to other companies and work with other companies and, do event announcing and judging and whatever I could do in BMX to keep my passion alive there. And so here, instead of doing real estate, I said, okay, I don't mind. I kind of enjoy the licensing thing. So in addition to licensing my photos, let me help other people license their photos. And so my income streams went from shooting, licensing, and then the education. And so education is kind of what I picked up last year when things were a little bit slower work-wise. That's when I started doing the online workshops and stuff. And so for me, that's my way currently of still doing things my way. So I can turn down work because I don't want to do this type of photo shoot or shoot your style that you want me to shoot. So I'm going to turn that down, and the money that I lose on that, I'm going to go sell somebody else's photos for them and make the money there. Or I'm going to do an online workshop and make the money there. And I'll enjoy that, and I'll feel good about it in my heart and in my mind, as opposed to doing construction photos that I'm not stoked on.
For you, I mean, I know I've known you for several years now. Like, we know each other pretty well, like, considering, like, compared to most people in the industry, like, we spent, like, 3 or 4 days together filming that stuff. What is when it comes to education, you clearly have a passion for it, and it's not, nobody does education for the money. Like, I'm sorry, like, yes, you make money doing those things, but it's like, you can make more money doing an architecture shoot. Yeah. So when it comes to education specifically, you're making these YouTube videos, you have these online workshops that you're selling for like $30 or whatever, well, live or whatever. I don't even know what you sell them for. They're not expensive is my point. Yeah. You're not making a ton of money off of these. Like, what motivates you to do education?
Yeah, good question. So, I mean, I've always, like you said, I've got a passion for that. Like, even when I was in college studying graphic design, in the back of my mind, I was like, seeing what my professors do, I was like, I could see myself like being a professor and like teaching graphic design like this. Like, I enjoy that part, And so even as far back as that, I enjoyed it. And then when I did the BMX thing, I did educational blog post of like, here's how I shot this photo. I just thought it was cool to like explain my process of like how I shoot a photo or whatever, and people resonated with it. And, I kind of saw that, and then ended up doing a couple of like photo workshops with Red Bull, like using a Red Bull athlete of like, here's how you shoot a BMX photo, and so I did a little education there, and then I got into CrossFit, kind of brought that out again, became a coach on the side. So I was shooting, and then, a couple nights a week I would coach for 1 or 2 hours, just to be able to share my passion and help people and educate them or whatever. And so there's something that's just always been there. And so I think, not like all that's in hindsight, right? Like, I didn't put all that together and really until now, because after shooting architecture for several years, then it finally came out, and like you kind of pulled it out of me with the licensing course and kind of pushed me to do that course. And once I did that and realized that people will listen to what I say and pay for it, it's like, okay, cool. Like, I do have something to share, but in the beginning, I didn't have anything to share. I wasn't experienced enough. And now that I do have enough experience, and now that people do like what I'm saying or shooting or posting or whatever, you build up a little bit of audience, and I just enjoy sharing it with people. And I think, going back to the ego thing, part of it, if I'm being honest with you and myself, like slightly ego driven, just in the sense that like you want to feel accepted, right? Which is funny because when I left BMX, I like absolutely wanted to be a nobody. And I was so happy that nobody knew my name anymore, because in the BMX industry, everybody knew me, and I had some bad experiences by people knowing me. And so I wanted to get away from that. I wanted to be a nobody. And then at a certain point, I think it's just wired in me, man. Like, a friend recently just kind of off the cuff said to his wife, like, oh, there's leaders and followers, and he's a leader, like talking about me. And I think that's just kind of how I'm wired a little bit, of like, be a leader type of person. And I even remember I felt like that with my mom a little bit. This is going to be a weird tangent example, but when I was young, my mom would always be involved with stuff at the church, and she would bring us there. Like if there was like a potluck dinner or something, or like a rummage sale, like she would be like helping organize stuff. And I remember being annoyed of like, Mom, why can't you just go to the thing? Why do you have to be involved in the thing, But she was always like needed to be involved. And that's kind of how I feel. Like if I'm into something, like I'm into it, and I want to be involved with it. I don't want to just do it and clock out and go home and like shut it down, It's like something wired in me that, I need to be a part of it. And so,
you just gave me words to explain what my thing too, because I've wondered that about myself. Like, why am I so community focused? Right. It's not that I want to be somebody necessarily, but I want to be ingrained in the community. I want to be like a huge part of it, contributing versus just constantly taking. Yeah, and I get the sense of that from you as well.
Yeah,
like,
for sure.
Like you even said before, like you didn't spend a lot of time in the Facebook group. You didn't really spend any time in the Facebook groups. Actually, I had to convince you to go in some of them. Yeah. For a while. Because like you're not really somebody who, like, it's not that you don't take advice, but you're not one that kind of like seeks the approval of others. You don't seek like, if you want to figure out how to do something, you'll study it, you'll learn it. Yeah. You know what I mean? And I think that's that going back to that leader thing. I think that's where that comes from. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's just kind of how I'm wired, and it's not intentional by any means. It's just how I am, and I've realized that and accepted and lean into it a little bit. Yeah. And I think. I don't want this part to sound ego-driven, but I think I have the self-realization enough to know that there are people that want a leader. Yeah. And I've seen, through the BMX world or whatever, in different positions I've been in the past, where people look to a leader, or they look for a mentor, or they look for somebody that they can kind of latch onto and follow or seek advice from or whatever. And if people need that, there needs to be somebody to give that. And so if I can be that for somebody and be helpful, then I want to do that. And I've had enough people be helpful to me that I want to pay it forward. Yeah. Right? Like, you, for example, with the business type stuff and just having these types of conversations, but even just like in Hawaii, like the first time I went to Hawaii on vacation and had like somebody take care of me and give me a place to stay and show me around, like show me that hospitality, like because of that first experience, dude, when people come to Hawaii, like, I'm their freaking tour guide all week long, like I'll take off and drop everything to like show them every corner of the island. And I just want to share what I'm passionate about.
I think there's a stigma in the community about people selling things, and it drives me crazy because, again, nobody who does education does it for the money. Like even, I would say arguably Mike Kelly's probably had the most success selling courses. And I guarantee you, if you asked him, it wasn't like a financially driven decision. I mean, maybe at some point, it makes sense to do it financially.
Yeah, like when they asked him to do a fourth one, he's like, it's a lot of work, but it's a lot of money, so let's go.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, but I'm saying when he first did it, that was one of F-Stopper's first tutorials, I think. And I don't think, maybe they had an idea as how much money they make, but I don't think Mike realized he would become Mike. Right. You know what I mean? Like how everybody in the community views him or whatever. Yeah. So... But I think he genuinely had something to share, but I think, and no offense against Mike, but for the longest time, it's like there's only like a handful of people in the community. Like you said, we need leaders in the community, and there's only a handful of people that people actually look to. So I find myself in the last year, and I discovered this around the time of probably the last PMRE, where it's like, I want to be somebody who encourages more leaders in our community. Like there's so many people with knowledge and like people just doing really cool things in this community, like, but they're not using their voice maybe they just don't know how in this community. I want to be the person that kind of helps them do that.
Yeah.
And it's like, what's that?
I think you certainly do that for me. Like I wouldn't have done a course, and without doing the licensure photos course that you pushed me to do, I would have never become known to go to PFRE to speak or to make workshops or whatever else, So you certainly did that to me, which I appreciate.
Yeah, well, but I think there needs to be more. Like, not that you're not enough, but I mean, and you're certainly not a one trick. Well, it's not. It's just licensing. That just happens to be what you were talking about for that particular thing.
Right.
But it's like, there's just so many different people. There's so many people that I see so much potential in. And it's like they're kind of just sitting on it. And it's like, I want to pull that out of them. Like, we just don't have enough of those people in the industry.
Yeah.
And not that we need more people to emulate. Like, I think it's good to figure out things on your own and also within a small group of, colleagues in the industry. I think that's super helpful. But like, I do think we need more leaders in the industry.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Well, going back to your question about the motivation for, the education stuff, you say people don't do it for the money. That's true. But at the same time, knowing that I wanted to diversify income streams, knowing that, we made money through the licensure photos course, there was a factor of like, hey, I see people are willing to pay for educational content. What can I do to help people? So the first workshop I did started as an idea, and I want to come back to the idea part. But once I realized that, instead of needing to make an entire course, I could do workshops and like an email template bundle and, sell smaller things that aren't, take months and months and months to produce. I realized, okay, well, if I build up a small library or big library, whatever, if I grow a library of content, that can be, more or less passive income. But it's cool because I can still do it my way, like I talked about before. And so part of all of that is I like to create stuff.
Yeah.
And so part of the fun in it for me is figuring out, like, you and I have had talks of like, we have ideas. How do we get the idea out there in a packageable way that like makes sense for people, resonates with people and helps people? And is it like, a monthly Patreon thing? Like, all right, what does that look like? And is it this and this? And I mean, even just the photo course started as an idea. Like I threw it out to the Facebook group of like, hey, I'm thinking about live streaming this, or like, would anybody be, willing to watch a video about this if I made it? And all these people were like, whoa, what are you talking about? And that's when Brian Berkowitz was like, hey, let's do a little webinar on this. And then you were like, hey, you should do a course on this. And so it all starts with an idea of like, I just want to create something. And I think I'm good at creating stuff and not super good at executing, or not the follow through. What am I trying to say? But like, I love the process of like getting it done.
Yeah.
But once it's there, it's kind of like, I don't want to keep nurturing it that much. Yeah. And so with the workshops, I felt like if I can just build a web page where you can go and like click on a number of different things and buy. And if I make a new one, that prompts people to go back there and maybe they'll see an old one that they also want. And so it can be, another revenue stream. And I tried this time more so than in the past to build it in such a way that it can grow and it can sustain it and be a little bit longer term. Because historically it's like, this seems cool, let me see if it works. And then whether it works or not, it's like, cool, I tried the idea, next idea.
Yeah.
And so for the workshops, I wanted it to be a little bit more sustainable where it can have a longer shelf life and I can do it for the next several years, once every month, every couple of months or whatever, once I get the next idea for the workshop. And I would do it more often if I had more ideas, honestly. Yeah. I wish people would give me more ideas. Like I wish the people that are willing to pay for them would tell me what they wanted to learn about so I could make a workshop about it, because I haven't done one in 3 months because I just don't have the next idea of something that I...
And they're out there. It's just, it's like, but I think what people don't understand, especially if they haven't taken one of your workshops, is like, you don't just do what I do and just like hit record and start talking. Like that's what I do. Like I'm very spontaneous. Like I just, there's an idea and then I just hit record. Like, and I put no thought into it. I used to, but not anymore. But you will put together, a keynote presentation. You'll like reorder things. You'll spend a significant amount of time planning these things so that you can get them delivered in a short amount of time. I tell people this story all the time. You went through 9 iterations of the learn to license your photo script before we hit record. Not only did you do 9 iterations, didn't you originally wait? No, I tried convincing you to record yourself talking about it. Yeah. You're like, I can't do this.
Yeah. I have to just write it.
Yeah, you just wrote it all out. And then we even did a few, like when we were actually filming, we did a few revisions as well, like on location. And we also trimmed stuff out in the post-production process that wasn't relevant because you wanted to make sure that everything, and by the way, this isn't an ad for everything, so just chill out. You went through everything and you just made sure that there was no bloat in there. Yeah. That every single thing that you were describing was valuable. There's no videos in that course that aren't valuable. Yeah. And also but my point is your workshops are a smaller version of that. Right. Like you put a lot of effort into those things.
And the reason being is you were talking about before how I'm not the one to I kind of figure out things on my own, right? Yeah. And, I don't go seek out courses a lot or go ask people random advice and things like that. Like I'm kind of more figured out on my own. And so when I do seek out things, I want to get to the point. Yeah. And so, if you look at my YouTube videos, instead of 15 minutes, Matthew Anderson, I like his videos. I like his content. He's got great traction. He's got great content. But all of his are like 15 to 20-minute videos. And I look at that, I'm like, okay, I would have made that into 3 minutes. And so
you ever watch any of my videos?
I try to sometimes.
30 minutes.
I've got one bookmarked, actually. Yeah. But, for me, it's like, okay, I know my attention span and what I want to consume, so I'm going to create content for me. Yeah. And I don't know if it's resonating or not, but, it seems like I chop it down to 3 minutes or 5 minutes for YouTube, and then I chop that and try to get it into 60 or 90 seconds for an Instagram reel. And that's where it gets the most views is Instagram. And so it's like, maybe I should cut it even further, because I'm cutting down the 5 minutes into 60 seconds. Yeah. So do I even need all 5 minutes,
I started a comment on Facebook and then I don't think I ever posted it, but like your circular polarizer video is probably one of the better videos on circular. Like I've been using one for years. I know how to use one. I don't know how to explain what I'm doing with it though. Yeah. But like that video, you obviously did some research to make sure you understood that you were explaining it. Like you know what it was doing, but it's like maybe you didn't have the language. So my point is you take time, you plan these things out, you do your research, you figure out ways to word things, you script it out, you refine it, you film it,
and squeeze it.
You squeeze it up. And it's like, your videos are very concise. They're consistent as well. It's like there's no bloat in them.
And,
like,
and
I know
also
exactly what I'm gonna get when I listen to you.
I take inspiration for other people. Like, I'm a huge fan of Mr. Beast. Yeah. Biggest YouTuber out there. Yeah. And I look at his like intro hooks. Yeah. In terms of like how he just like jumps right into a video. And I've watched like almost every interview he's ever done with people and like kind of listened to how he talks about these things of like, retention and ending a video quickly because as soon as you start the outro, they leave. And so like, I never have anything in my videos that say who I am or welcome back to the channel or hey guys, thanks for watching, please subscribe. Like, and my ads, quote unquote, like if I'm, want to drop a line in there to remind people that I have, content for sale on my website, it's like buried in the middle that's like sort of relevant to the video and not just like a little blurb at the end. So like I basically try to like think, how would Mr. Beast make this video? Yeah.
Maybe that's another video idea, how you put your YouTube videos together. Yeah. I'd watch it. Yeah. I'd buy it. Yeah. I don't know. I think, I don't know. That's one thing I wanted to make sure I talked about. Like I said, there's a what's the word I'm looking for? There's just the stigma in the community sometimes about people selling things. Like another course is out there, or this or that. But it's like, I think the difference between what you're doing and what like you see, there's like probably 8 or 9 different real estate photography courses out there now. And it's like, what you're doing stuff that's like very relevant topics. And sometimes they're not topics that are even talked about or covered. Like licensing, there's nothing out there on licensing. There's no videos in our industry on circular polarizers. There's no videos out there on the processes that you've covered in your workshops. Portfolio building, book building. Yeah. It's like, those things are all super relevant topics that are valuable. And going back to what I was saying, yes, you do make money on them, but it's not, you're not making enough money to justify the amount of time you spend on those. Like I know that because I spend hardly any time on mine, but they're still not like financially. If I had to like bill my hourly rate for what I'm doing, I'm not making that money. I'm losing a lot of money making those, you know? So anyway, I just wanted to make sure like I like pointed that out. It's like, for me, and especially somebody who makes stuff and sells things, it's like, I'm kind of very defensive about people who sell things online. Like I stick up for those people.
Yeah.
There was somebody who messaged me recently asking if I had any suggestions for somebody who does mentoring that isn't doing it just for the money. And I'm like, dude, you obviously, and I'll show you the message later.
Wow.
I was like, dude, you obviously have no idea.
Yeah.
Like I charge $250 for a 60 to 90 minute session to do online or coaching or whatever, one-on-one.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that to like brag or anything. I'm just saying like it's because if I put effort and energy into anything, it's that.
Yeah.
Like, and I don't just keep it to 60 to 90 minutes. Like I've got like one person that I work with every single month right now. It's a minimum of 60 to 90 minute conversation just about them and their business or just the problems they're dealing with like maybe life a little bit. But it's also like randomly he'll message me throughout the month, hey, I've got this coming up. He sent me a video recently that he did. And he was like, hey, what do you think of this before I send it off? And I went through and I re-edited it for him, showing him like a screen capture of what I would do on some things. So my point is, it's like, I'm not like, that is more than my hourly rate.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you don't do it for the money.
Yeah.
And I know that's an incredibly long tangent on that, but it's important for me to kind of really drive that point home.
Yeah.
Like, so.
That's interesting that somebody said that, man. That's wild. And one thing that I've noticed for me with the one-on-one consulting, I call it consulting now.
I like that better. I just can't train myself to.
Well, the thing is, you kind of are coaching because you're ongoing with this guy. Like you just talked about one person who like contacts you throughout the month and you follow up with them. And for me, I did that a couple of times and I felt almost like a responsibility as a coach to make them succeed or help them succeed.
Yeah.
And if they didn't, I felt like it was partly a reflection on me. Whereas when I call it consulting and I don't, I'm not tied down to an ongoing like relationship of any kind. It's just a one-off, like you book a call, you pay, you book a call, you pay. If you want to stop, cool, no problem. Then I don't feel the responsibility of like, I need to help you succeed. Like I've given you the advice you've come to me for during this 2-hour block, and what you do with that advice after you leave me, up to you, So
you're again doing things the way you want to do them that makes sense for your business. Like I like that too, because like I do enjoy the coaching. I like the ongoing relationships, but I can't do that for everybody.
Yeah.
There's some people where I can talk to them once and that's all we need to talk for. But there's some people it's like there's like 2 people in particular that I talk to regularly that it does require that ongoing relationship, and I feel invested in them. Like I really do want them to succeed, and it's like there's always just so many like little things that like if I had the outside perspective that they're getting when I was at their point in my career or that point in my career, like it would have changed everything for me. I wouldn't have put so much energy into the real estate photography business that I did. I went from 2011 to 2017 doing just real estate photography, or 2018 doing just real estate photography, and it took me till 2018 to start actually pursuing architectural photography, even though I wanted to do that for like 3 or 4 years. I didn't even start actually pursuing it until then. So I don't know where I was going with all that, but it doesn't matter. So anyway, all right. So is there anything else you want to leave? Any thoughts you want to leave? We've been going for a really long time. So
yeah, I think we covered a lot. Let's wrap it up.
Cool.